She looked the most feared man in the city straight in the eyes, took the envelope stuffed with cash, and calmly pushed it back across the table. The entire room froze. Even the music from the nightclub suddenly felt distant. Everyone knew who was sitting in front of her. Damian Moretti wasn't just another wealthy customer looking for attention. He was the man politicians secretly feared, businessmen desperately obeyed, and criminals prayed they would never disappoint. People had disappeared for showing him less disrespect than this. The club owner had already begun imagining the headlines that would appear the next morning. Damian's bodyguard stiffened, expecting a single order that would end the young woman's life. But the order never came. Instead, Damian leaned back in his chair and watched her with something no one had ever seen in his eyes before: curiosity. He had spent his entire life buying loyalty, silence, and affection. Yet this woman, dressed in glittering stage clothes and exhausted from another endless night of dancing, had refused enough money to change her life forever. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't trying to impress him. She simply turned around and walked out. That was the exact moment the most dangerous man in the city stopped thinking like a mafia boss and started thinking like a man who desperately needed answers. Because women had always wanted something from Damian Moretti: power, luxury, protection. But this woman wanted absolutely nothing. And that made her unforgettable. Her name was Sophia. To the customers at Velvet Room, she was just another dancer performing beneath bright lights while strangers threw money they barely cared about. But the truth was hidden behind every smile she forced onto her face. Every dollar she earned disappeared before the sun came up. Half paid for rent in a tiny apartment whose walls were beginning to crack. The rest paid hospital bills, medicine, doctor visits, and whatever was left bought groceries for her 16-year-old sister, Lily. 3 years earlier, their parents had died in a terrible accident, leaving Sophia to become a sister, a guardian, and the only person standing between Lily and the world. She never complained. She simply kept dancing. No customer knew that after leaving the club at 3 in the morning, she spent the rest of the night sitting beside a hospital bed until visiting hours ended. She wasn't chasing luxury. She was racing against time. That was why refusing Damian's money made no sense. She needed it more than anyone. Yet she had still said no. Damian couldn't stop thinking about it. The following night, he returned to Velvet Room. Not for business. Not for pleasure. For her. From the shadows of his private booth, he watched Sophia perform again. Unlike the other dancers, she never pretended to fall in love with the audience. She never searched the room for the richest customer. She danced because she had no choice. And somehow that honesty made her impossible to ignore. When her performance ended, Damian quietly called the club owner. "I want to know everything about her." Within 24 hours, a thick file landed on his desk. He expected to discover hidden debts, criminal connections, or someone secretly manipulating her. Instead, he found something completely different: hospital receipts, medical reports, employment records showing she'd worked 3 jobs before becoming a dancer. Every page told the story of a woman sacrificing her own dreams to keep someone else alive. For the first time in years, Damian felt ashamed of how easily money had solved every problem in his own life. Sophia wasn't refusing wealth because she was proud. She was refusing because she'd learned that expensive gifts almost always came with invisible chains. And Damian suddenly realized someone had taught her that lesson the hard way. The next evening, instead of visiting the club, Damian quietly followed her after work. He stayed far enough behind that she never noticed. She didn't go shopping. She didn't meet friends. She didn't spend a single dollar on herself. She stopped at a small bakery, buying yesterday's bread because it was cheaper. Then she crossed the street carrying a worn grocery bag before entering a children's hospital. Damian watched through the window. Sophia wasn't smiling anymore. She sat beside a teenage girl lying in bed, carefully cutting an apple into tiny slices while pretending everything would be okay. The girl laughed. Sophia laughed with her. But when Lily looked away, Sophia wiped tears from her face before anyone could notice. Damian had seen people cry because they feared him. He had seen people cry after losing fortunes. But he'd never seen someone cry simply because they were trying so hard to stay strong for someone they loved. That image followed him all night. The next morning, Damian made a decision. Without using his name, He arranged for every one of Lily's overdue hospital bills to be paid anonymously. No conditions, no signatures, no favors expected in return. He wanted nothing except to make one burden disappear from Sophia's shoulders. 2 days later, Sophia stood at the hospital's billing desk, staring at the receptionist in complete disbelief. "There has to be some mistake," she whispered. "There isn't," the receptionist replied gently. Someone settled everything. Sophia's heart didn't fill with relief. It filled with fear, because she knew one thing about life. Nobody gave away that much money for free. Someone always came back to collect. She walked out of the hospital clutching the receipt, her mind racing with questions. Who had done this? Why? And what would they ask for when they finally came knocking? She had no idea that across the street, hidden inside a black car, Damian Moretti was watching her with a quiet smile. He believed he had helped the woman he couldn't stop thinking about. He didn't realize his anonymous gift had only convinced Sophia that another nightmare was about to begin. For 3 days, Sophia barely slept. Every time her phone rang, her heart pounded. Every knock on the apartment door made her freeze. Someone had paid nearly every bill standing between Lily and a healthy future. It should have felt like a miracle. Instead, it felt like a trap. Life had taught Sophia one painful lesson. Nothing expensive ever came without a price. She had learned that from her father. Years ago, he had accepted money from powerful men after promising it was only a business deal. He never explained who they were or what they wanted. A week later, he was dead. Her mother died not long after in what the police called an accident. Sophia never believed it. She believed money had stolen her family. From that day on, she promised herself she would never owe anyone more than she could repay, especially a powerful man. That promise was the reason she had pushed Damian's envelope back across the table. She would rather dance every night than sell her freedom. Meanwhile, Damian couldn't stop thinking about her. His advisors noticed something had changed. The man who once spent every waking hour expanding his business now disappeared. For hours without explanation, they assumed he was planning something dangerous. The truth was almost embarrassing. He had started parking outside a neighborhood cafe every Tuesday morning. Not because the coffee was good, because Sophia stopped there after leaving the hospital. She always ordered the cheapest drink on the menu. She always carried a notebook. And every Tuesday, while Lily attended physical therapy upstairs, Sophia sat by the window filling page after page with handwritten ideas. One morning, after weeks of silently watching, Damian finally walked inside. He didn't wear an expensive suit. He left his bodyguards outside. For the first time in years, he wanted someone to see him, not his reputation. Sophia looked up as he approached. For a second, neither of them spoke. She recognized him immediately. "You followed me." "I found a good cafe," Damian replied calmly. She wasn't convinced. "I don't think men like you drink coffee in places like this." A faint smile crossed his face. "And what kind of man am I?" "The kind who gets whatever he wants." Damian looked down at his untouched coffee before answering. "I used to think so." There was no arrogance in his voice, only honesty. That caught Sophia off guard. She expected threats. She expected expensive gifts. Instead, they talked. Not about money, not about the nightclub, not even about his business. They spoke about books, music, the rain that had soaked the city all week. And for nearly an hour, Damian forgot he was one of the most feared men in the country. He simply enjoyed listening to a woman who treated him like an ordinary person. When Sophia finally stood to leave, Damian reached for the bill. She gently stopped him. "I can pay for my own coffee." He nodded. "I know." For some reason, those 3 words stayed with her all day. Weeks slowly turned into months. Their meetings became a quiet routine. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes during walks through a nearby park, sometimes outside the hospital while Lily slept. Damian never asked Sophia to quit dancing. He never offered another envelope of money. Instead, he listened, and Sophia slowly began sharing pieces of herself that no one else knew. She confessed that she had once dreamed of becoming a dance instructor for children, not performing under flashing lights, teaching little girls to believe in themselves. "But dreams are expensive," she laughed softly. Damian looked at her. "No." She raised an eyebrow. "They're just delayed." Sophia smiled. It was the first genuine smile Damian had ever seen from her. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't fascinated by her anymore. He was in love. Not because she was beautiful, although she was, not because she challenged him, although she did. He loved her because every time she walked into a room, she made him want to become a better man than he had been the day before. For someone who had built his entire life on power, that feeling was far more frightening than any enemy. But love has a way of demanding honesty. And Damian was hiding the biggest truth of all. One rainy evening, he visited the old family archives inside one of his office buildings. Boxes filled with decades of records lined the walls. Names, transactions, deals made long before he became the head of the organization. He searched for one file, Sophia's father. When he finally found it, his hands went cold. Her father had borrowed money from people who once worked under Damian's predecessor, the same ruthless men Damian had spent years removing after taking control. The report revealed something even worse. The accident that killed Sophia's parents had never been an accident. It had been arranged to silence witnesses after a failed financial scheme. Damian closed the file. His chest tightened. He had never ordered those crimes. At the time, he wasn't even leading the organization. But that didn't matter. The empire carrying his name had destroyed the family of the woman he loved. He wanted to tell her immediately. He even drove to the hospital that night. But as he arrived, he looked through Lily's room window. Sophia was laughing. Lily was laughing with her. For the first time since he'd met them, both sisters looked genuinely happy. Damian couldn't bring himself to destroy that happiness. Not yet. He convinced himself he would tell her tomorrow, then the day after, then next week. But secrets don't stay buried forever. One afternoon, Sophia arrived at the cafe carrying exciting news. Lily's doctor believed she could finally return home within a month. Sophia's eyes sparkled with hope. I feel like life is finally changing. Damian smiled. So do I. She reached across the table and gently took his hand. It was the first time either of them had crossed that invisible line between friendship and something much deeper. Neither of them noticed the man sitting near the back of the cafe. He quietly lifted his phone, took several photographs, and sent them to an unknown number with one short message. She found him. Neither Damian nor Sophia realized that the past they were trying to leave behind had just found them first. The message was only 2 words. She found him. Sophia never saw it. Damian never knew it had been sent. But somewhere across the city, a man named Victor stared at the photograph of Damian and Sophia, holding hands across a small cafe table. His jaw tightened. For years, he had hidden behind new identities and false names. He had once worked for the men who destroyed Sophia's family before disappearing, with millions of dollars that were never recovered. He wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in survival. If Sophia ever learned the truth, she might unknowingly expose him. And that was a risk he couldn't allow. A few days later, an unmarked envelope appeared outside Sophia's apartment. There was no return address, only her name. Inside were copies of old newspaper articles, faded financial records, and one photograph. The photograph showed her father standing beside several powerful men years before his death. One face had been circled with a red marker. It belonged to Damian's late uncle, the former head of the organization. Damian had inherited. Sophia's hands began to shake. The final page contained only one sentence. The man you love belongs to the family that destroyed yours. She read it again, then again. Her breathing became uneven. No, she whispered. There has to be another explanation. Without thinking, she ran to Damian's office. She needed him to deny everything. She needed him to tell her it was all a lie. When Damian saw her standing in the doorway, he immediately knew. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She looked broken. She quietly placed the papers on his desk. Tell me. He lowered his eyes. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Damian answered with the only thing he still had left to offer. The documents are real. Sophia felt the room spinning. You knew? I found out recently. And you didn't tell me. I was afraid. She laughed softly. It wasn't a laugh of happiness. It was the sound of someone watching their heart fall apart. You were afraid? She looked into his eyes. I built my life around never accepting money from powerful men because powerful men destroyed my family. A tear rolled down her cheek. And somehow, I fell in love with one. Damian stepped toward her. She stepped back. I never ordered what happened to your parents. I know. They were already gone before I took control. I know. I spent years destroying the people responsible. I know. Every answer only made her cry harder. Then why does this hurt so much? She whispered. Damian had no answer. Because sometimes love isn't destroyed by lies. Sometimes it's destroyed by truths that arrive too late. Sophia walked away without another word. Damian didn't follow her. For the first time in his life, he understood that love could not be chased. It had to be chosen freely. Weeks passed. Sophia quit dancing. With Lily finally healthy enough to return home, she found work teaching beginner dance classes at a neighborhood community center. The pay was modest. The building was old. But every afternoon, she watched little girls laugh as they learned their first dance steps. For the first time in years, she felt close to the dream she had buried. Still, every quiet moment reminded her of Damian. She missed the man who listened more than he spoke. The man who remembered how she took her coffee. The man who waited outside the hospital simply because he knew she hated walking home alone after dark. She missed him, but she couldn't forget where he came from. Meanwhile, Damian looked around the mansion that had once represented success. It had never felt emptier. The expensive cars meant nothing. The endless meetings meant nothing. The power he'd spent decades building suddenly felt worthless. One evening, he gathered his closest advisors. I've made my decision, he said calmly. They waited. I'm leaving. Silence filled the room. You can't, one of them finally replied. This organization needs you. Damian slowly shook his head. No. It needs someone who still believes power is worth more than peace. Over the following months, Damian did something no one believed possible. He sold legitimate businesses to independent owners. He donated anonymous funds to charities that helped families affected by organized crime. He cooperated with investigators to dismantle the remaining illegal operations still connected to the old regime. He walked away from the empire piece by piece, not because someone forced him, because for the first time in his life, he wanted to become someone worthy of love instead of fear. Nearly a year passed. Spring returned to the city. One Saturday afternoon, Sophia was preparing for her students' first dance recital. The small auditorium buzzed with nervous excitement. Parents filled the seats. Children giggled backstage. As Sophia adjusted the costume of one nervous little girl, she noticed a familiar figure standing quietly near the back of the room. Damian. No bodyguards. No luxury suit. No expensive watch. Just a simple navy jacket and a single white rose in his hand. After the performance ended, the children ran to their families. The room slowly emptied. Sophia finally walked toward him. You came. I wasn't sure I should. She noticed how different he looked. The confidence was still there, but the weight he used to carry in his eyes had disappeared. I heard you left everything. I left what was keeping me from becoming the man I wanted to be. He handed her the white rose. I don't expect forgiveness. She accepted the flower. I don't expect another chance. She looked down before asking the question that had quietly lived inside her heart for months. If I hadn't walked away, would you still have left? Damian didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because loving you showed me the kind of life I wanted long before I lost you. Sophia felt tears gathering again. Not tears of pain, tears of understanding. She finally realized something. The envelope of money he had offered her months ago had been easy. Anyone with power could give away cash. But giving away an empire, giving away the identity he had spent his entire life building, that was a sacrifice money could never buy. She stepped closer. So, what happens now? Damian smiled gently. I honestly don't know. For the first time in my life, I'm hoping instead of planning. Sophia laughed through her tears. Then, without another word, she reached for his hand. This time, she didn't let go. 3 years later, Lily graduated from nursing school, determined to care for families the way strangers had once cared for hers. Sophia opened a small dance academy for children whose parents couldn't afford expensive lessons. She refused to turn away a single child because of money. Every year, anonymous donations arrived just before enrollment began. She always knew who had sent them. And every year, Damian quietly insisted his name remain absent from every plaque, every certificate, and every thank you speech. He had finally learned the lesson. Sophia had tried to teach him the night they first met. Love was never something you could purchase. It wasn't hidden inside envelopes full of cash. It wasn't earned through power. It wasn't protected by fear. Real love was built one honest choice at a time. And sometimes, the richest man in the room becomes truly wealthy only after meeting the one woman who refuses everything he can buy. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven Damian or walked away forever?